G'day, welcome to Mark and Sam After Work. Today I wanted to do a video on, or a very simple video on how to use rifle scopes, how to use tactical rifle scopes. The video is inspired by a lot of comments that are not really, I don't think, understanding very much, using the term holdover all the time, how much holdover, that sort of things. And sometimes it's probably just poor terminology. But it is in the basics of how you use rifle scopes, a lot how you use them in games and a lot how you use them in the reality of the old style simple duplex rifle scope that you zeroed the rifle scope so it aimed to hit where at a certain distance, and then you use holdover to make corrections for wind or for movement or for elevation. So the basics of that, for those who really don't understand what I'm talking there at all, is that a rifle is not a laser beam and you don't point and shoot at any distance. It doesn't work that way. A bullet is always suffering the effects of gravity, suffering the effects of pushing through the wind and being pushed by the wind. And if you have to allow for any movement or that sort of stuff, then you have to allow for that movement because it doesn't get there instantly. So that means if you've got a rifle, a scope that's zeroed at 100 yards and you want to shoot 500 yards, the bullet is going to fall short. If you aim at the 500 yard target, you have to hold the rifle up more so the bullet travels out and gets to the 500 yards or 200 yards or 1,000 yards or whatever it is. You have to allow for the fact it's going to fall more. If you're shooting a target and there's a heavy crosswind, and the wind will push the bullet. So if you aim dead straight at it, it's going to go to, if it's pushing from the right, it's going to go to the left. If you've got a moving target where it's moving along and you aim dead straight at it and it takes even half a second or a quarter of a second for the bullet to get there, then where you shot at, the target's no longer going to be there, it's going to move. So you've got to allow for where that target moved to. So all those ways, in a crude sense, what we used to do with either iron sights on a rifle or with a simple basic old style, generally a duplex, I won't get too complicated, a simple set of crosshairs is if you're shooting longer, you'd hold the crosshairs above. It's called hold over. You'd hold the crosshairs above by the right amount, and that's what dot reticles, when you have little dots on them and things like that. There's various ways that you see reticles that do those type of things, and now you see a lot more complicated reticles if you're paying attention. There's all sorts of dots all over them. That's for exactly that reason. You hold over by the right amount. And then if you're dealing with wind or with movement or whatever it is that means you need to go to one side or the other side of the target, that's holding for wind or holding for movement. So you hold up by X amount, hold left or right by X amount, and that's the basic way of using a scope without adjusting anything in it. It'll just work like that. There's things called BDC, bullet drop compensating reticles, that sort of stuff, which is all about using holdover. But a tactical scope, although you can use them that way also, is designed to be able to use by turning these dials here. That's what we're up to. When you see people turning these dials, that's actually dealing with that in a different fashion. What's actually happening in that situation is if you've got you're out to, let's say we're zeroed at 100 yards and you've got a 500 yard shot, and you've got to hold up by X amount, and that's the bullet drop over that. And let's say you've got a 5 mile an hour wind. So you're going to have to hold for the wind. You're going to have to hold into the wind so the bullet gets pushed onto target. Now, you could do it by hold, but with turrets, with dials on your scope, what we can actually do, you need to know these specifications, and there's all sorts of ways to work that out. That's not what this video is about, but you know that it needs X amount of adjustment of what that holdover is. That's X amount of adjustment. You can then take your scope and dial that amount of adjustment, and then you can hold your crosshairs straight on. Then you don't need to hold over. You've dialed it. You hold your crosshairs straight on. That's sorted out your elevation. Go to the side here. On the side is where your windage is. I take the cap off this one. So take the cap off and do the same thing. You then know, once again, whether it's an app, whether it's a program, it's a table, where it's in your head, you know that this amount of wind, you read the wind, this amount of wind means I'm going to need to hold that far. It's also the same as knowing this amount of wind means that is how far I'll dial that far. And then you set up to where, rather than holding off the target, you put your crosshairs straight on the target and do the same thing. So that's the basics of what you're looking at. There's other features on tactical scopes. You've got a power thing down here which gives you a zoom in and zoom out, so you can look with looking closer at the target or seeing more than the target, seeing the rest. So zoom in and zoom out, it's called the power over here. And generally the other side, sometimes at the front, but on the other side will be your parallax, which is a focus, but it actually means it lines the scope up so it's all working properly at the distance that you want to see at, so that you're actually targeting at. You do all these features, that's what's going on with the tactical scope. But the big call is when you say what was the holdover and you've just seen something dial, you may be aware that you're talking about the bullet drop or how much MOA, how much you had to dial in to deal with that. But largely, if it's dialed here, there's no holdover, you're holding the crosshairs directly on. It's just the scope is adjusted so that then your barrel is pointing in a different place, but you are aiming directly at target. So I hope that makes some sense. Always put them back to 0 when you messed with them. Yeah, I hope that makes some sense for you. That's what's going with the tactical scope. In the finer details, we've got other videos here to explain in finer details all that sort of stuff there. But that's the dialing way of how to use a tactical scope, which deals with those bullet movements that are either by gravity, by going through the wind, by getting pushed by the wind, or dealing with the target being moving and trying to deal with an interceptor in a different place to where it is, to where you actually, when you pull the trigger. Anyway guys, I hope that was informative. Thank you very much for checking in. I'll catch you next time.